50.1% owned joint venture with Powermetal Resources, taken on in April 2020. The joint venture has applied for 12 licenses covering 2,188 square kilometres of gold exploration acreage, and it's in a major position in the heart of Victoria Goldfields in a growing exploration interest area. So, Andrew, what is Australia, and in particular Victoria, like to do business in, and how mining friendly is the state?
Well, Australia has been one of the most mining friendly jurisdictions in the world historically. The Victoria Goldfields in 1850 onwards were the site of the second biggest gold rush in history after the California gold rush. And the wealth of cities like Melbourne was entirely based on gold. And all the big public buildings in Melbourne and other cities in the state of Victoria were built on the profits of gold. And so it's got a long history of mining. It's got the rule of law, obviously, and it's got a highly trained workforce. It's still important for the Australian economy, mining generally. The iron ore and coal from Australia powers the world's steel industry. What happened after the Victoria Goldfields mineralization near surface was exhausted, or was thought to be exhausted, and that is in the late 19th century, or by 1900, is the emphasis all switched to Western Australia and the discoveries there. But apart from Western Australia, Victoria is still the biggest historic gold producer in Australia, and it's got 12 goldfields that have each produced more than 1 million ounces. And obviously the biggest of those are Bendigo and Ballarat, Castlemaine historically. And they produced, those 12 goldfields have contributed 71% of the production from Victoria, but there's a huge amount still to discover. And what has happened in the last few years, I mean, really in this century, is people have started going back and starting to get more serious about exploring to find, in this often complex geology, the gold at depth. Because most of the alluvial deposits were traced to their primary sources, and that led to primary gold mineralization being mined. But no primary deposits that have been mined in Victoria have been found by other means, in other words, by drilling down to them or by interpreting geophysics. So, the brownfields contain world-class deposits, blind world-class deposits that just haven't been found. And undercover in the north of the state, under the Murray River Basin, which is lots of soil coverage, the state did some geophysics and released the results of that from 2005 onwards. So companies like Catalyst Metals have gone in there, and they have drilled and found blind discoveries undercover like Tandara and Four Eagles, which proves it can be done. So we're in a new era for the Victoria Goldfields.
And what is the mining infrastructure like in Victoria?
It's extremely good. Gold doesn't need a great deal of infrastructure. What it needs is the human resource, the presence of drilling companies, and the presence of metallurgists and geologists and all that sort of thing. You don't need big railways. You can get gold out quite easily. So yeah, it's a very easy place to operate.
Why do you think there is so much interest in Victoria at the moment?
I think probably the first reason would be the success of the Fosterville mine. And that was reopened in 2005. And it was gradually increasing production up to about 2012, then from 2012 to 2016. In 2016, already looking like a really good underground mine, it was taken over by Kirkland Lake from Canada, who have since expanded it. And in the first quarter of this year, it produced 175,000 ounces at 41 grams a ton, which is about nearly 1 1/3 ounces per ton. Now, those are spectacular grades. I don't think anywhere else in the world is doing that kind of production at that kind of grade. And they've gone down to 1,000, 1,200 meters there, and they're getting this kind of grade, and there's more that they can find there. So this has alerted everybody to the fact that in that area, around Bendigo. You can interpret the geophysics and the geology to find where the primary gold might be at depth, because after all, in a way, the Fosterville mine stumbled on it by accident by just following their noses and going along and down gradually, mining until they came across it. So that plus the blind discoveries undercover that I referred to just a moment ago have led to people's realization that with the ability to look under the surface of the Earth and interpret it now through geophysics, you can actually revisit these gold fields and find a lot more gold, because that gold will be there. It wasn't that in the year 1850, miraculously, God had put all the gold within 100 feet or 200 feet of the surface. Now, in Ballarat, a little further to the south, around which much of our ground is, the geology is a little bit more folded and complex, but that's not new. I mean, you go to the west of Canada, for example, to the Overthrust Belt, extremely complicated geology. So all this needs is just a new approach, and that's why people have got so extraordinarily interested in it recently.
And what is the scale of opportunity, and can you expand on the recent NI 43101 report? What is it, and what was the requirement for such a report?
Well, in order to get listed on the Canadian market, you have to have a report done according to the Canadian standard, and it has to be according to the regulation called National Instrument 43/101. And that's really a prerequisite for listing in Canada. Now, it happens that the TSX is where there's the best market for this kind of thing, and there are 2 or 3 reasons for that. The first, of course, is Kirkland Lake is a great Canadian company, and people have seen their success in Victoria. Secondly, off the back of that, you've seen Fosterville South get listed in April this year, and it's had a spectacular performance since then. And people have noticed that. Obviously, it made a great deal of money. Then a number of other companies, like Mawson, like Nubian in particular, have gone on to acquired interests in Victoria Gold Properties and seen their prices rise 3-6 times. And so because people have made money there, they're willing to reinvest there. They think they understand it a bit. There's another factor, which is that it may be that the Canadian investors or North American investors have a slightly different attitude towards gold companies, in that maybe they look at them partly as having optionality, almost as if they're a financial instrument, particularly if they're in production. And so they seem to be higher rated than, say, in Australia. Whatever the reason, this is the place to go to list something in. And of course, there's another reason. You've got Eric Sprott and a number of other investors like him, but in particular him, who's a great gold bug and who has seeded or given money or been behind some of these companies that have had success in Australia. And that sort of raises all the boats on the TSX.
And finally, what is the roadmap going forward?
Clearly, we've got a large acreage position, but much more importantly, it's actually a good acreage position with lots of old mines and some huge potential geological targets there. The 43101, which is an independent geological report, has evidenced all of that and laid it out. Now, of course, we have to interpret it because there's a mass of information there, and we can then promote it through presentations, through presenting to people. We can draw out some strands from what's written there. What we can't do is do something that contradicts it or isn't backed up by what is in it. So this was like the foundation for what we do now, which is we could do a pre-IPO placing. We could farm out 1 or 2 of our tenements. But those things we're looking at actively, and we're getting approaches all the time. But the central strand of what we're going to do is we are going to list a really good gold company on the TSX that will have a very strong acreage position, similar to that of Fosterville South when it listed, in quality and bigger in extent. And we're going to list it on the TSX and hope that it will be successful. And we're doing this into a good gold market, because remember, the gold price has been in new high ground in the Australian dollar, as in most currencies, for quite a while. Although with the US dollar, it's only now, just recently, breaking through the all-time highs.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, for that brief synopsis on the Red Rock Resources Australasia joint